Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Oasis Solutions for our monthly Sage 100 Tips and Tricks webinar. And today we are going to focus on the order of closing modules in Sage 100. We're quickly approaching another year end, and want to talk about closing modules. But again, this isn't just related to year end. You should also be closing your modules on a monthly basis as well. And so we'll talk about that and some of the reasons why you want to close those modules, and also some things to check before you arbitrarily start closing your modules. So what we're going to do first is we're going to move to Sage 100, and I'm just going to show you a couple of modules and where you can determine what period Sage thinks the module is working in, the period and the calendar year. So if you, and also keep in mind with my demo data, I'm working well into the future. So that's why you're going to see some crazy dates here. But if I go into accounts payable, and I go to setup, and I go to accounts payable options, I'm going to see over here on the right what Sage thinks my current fiscal year is in the AP module and the current period. So let's say this was November of 2025, and I'm on a calendar year, not a fiscal year. Then it would mean that I have not closed a period since September. So that means I didn't do a September closing, and I didn't do an October closing because I'm currently working in November. So there's a process that you go through to close periods. You do not just go in and change the number here. It's going to think it's working in a different period, but it will not, it's going to mess up things like if you're tracking month to date or year to date information. It's not going to be calculating those buckets of data correctly if you're not going through the process. The other thing that you want to look at before you start arbitrarily closing periods is you want to take a look at each of your module setups and look at the history and see how long you are retaining history. So for instance, with accounts payable, you're saying that you want to retain vendor history for 2 years. So when you do a period end process in AP, it's going to come out here. It's going to look at first what period you're closing, because you have to close whatever period it thinks it's in. You can't say, well, I can't close September because I have an out of balance, but I'm finished with October. Can I close October and leave September open? You cannot. They have to be closed in order. So it's going to take a look at what period you are closing, and then it's going to look and see how long you want to retain history. So in this particular instance, any vendor history that is more than 2 years old, it is going to purge out of your Sage 100 data when you do that period end processing. Whoops. So keep that in mind. And depending on what version, if you are on a really old version of Sage, you can keep history in number of days versus in number of years. So I have seen people that have never done period end processing for years, but their history is set to keep it for 0 days. So maybe like paid invoices, keep for 0 days. When they close that out, it's going to wipe out everything that has been paid. You know, all those paid invoices. So you really need to take a look. But the newer versions of Sage are now keeping things by year versus by the number of days. If you're on a version prior to 2018 or 6.0, you need to be getting in touch with us to schedule an upgrade. And actually, at the time of this particular webinar, the 2021 version has probably already been released. So the supported versions at that point are only going to be the 2019, 2020, and 2021. So this is just an example of AP. We're going to take a look at a couple of other modules. So we'll look at AR. We'll go in and look at the setup and look at our AR options. And see, you'll notice that this fiscal period is different. So AR is not closed with the same consistency that AP is in my demo data. So if I look at the history button, I can see the set to various things as far as history is concerned. How many years do I want to retain customer history? How many years do I want to retain salesperson history? These, the settings now, I believe it's a minimum of 2 years, or you could go up to 99 years. On the left here, you're going to see the number of years to retain your cash receipt history. And it's going to ask on your retaining that deposit history, you have options. Do you want to do it for all transactions? Or if we start at the top, we have none, checks only, credit cards only, other types only, or all transactions. I am a firm believer in wherever you can track history, track it, and track it in as much detail as you can. So for instance, my invoice history, I retain the detail of those invoices. I also want to retain any deleted invoices or deleted comment lines. So, but again, the things that are affected by period end processing are where you're actually saying, I want to keep my history for X number of years or X number of days. Once you close a period, so let's say that you had your years to retain cash receipts down to 2 years, and you really wanted to keep it for much longer. Maybe you want to keep it for 7 years for audit purposes. If your setup is set at 2 years and you do a period end processing, and again, that's going to then purge your data, anything that's over 2 years old, any cash receipt history more than 2 years old, it's going to purge out of the system. Once you have gone through that process, the only way to get that Okay, I lost my audio, and I believe that my recording has continued, so I do apologize for that. What I was saying, I believe, when my audio stopped, is that once you have purged out that history, you can't just go, oh, I need to get it back. And the only way you can do that is you're going to have to restore from a backup. So rule number 1, you should always make sure you have a good backup before you close a period. Rule number 2 is don't start closing a period and having it purge data, and then all of a sudden you realize what you're doing and you didn't want to, and turn your workstation off or turn your laptop off. That is not going to fix anything, and is probably going to cause even more data corruption where you're going to have to restore from a backup. So just go through and check those, check any module that you own, things such as the library master module, the paperless office, bank reconciliation, those do not have year-end or period-end closings. So you might want to, just keep that in mind. So what we're going to look at now, and this document is actually available if you do a help search within your Sage 100 for order of module closing, or we can certainly provide you with a copy of this document if you would like. But this is the list, and I pulled this directly from Sage. This is the list in order of how you would close the modules. So you can kind of use this as a checklist. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, obviously, is make sure that you have a good backup. And then you're going to go through in this order, and this is how you're going to close things for the end of the year. And the reason why it's in a certain order is, here's an example down here. For sales orders can post to inventory, AR, and the GL. So all of your sales orders should be fully processed and done before you actually close inventory, AR, or GL. So you need to think about how the modules integrate with one another so that you are following the process correctly. Another example is in job cost. If you're doing invoices and job cost, those post in AR. So you would have to make sure that everything is posted in job cost and AR before you do your year end. Now, in talking about the payroll module, as long as you are on the new business framework payroll, which is 2.18 and higher, and that started with the version of Sage 100 2018, you can close your payroll prior to the next year starting. The history is managed completely differently, but if you are on the legacy payroll, which is version 2017 and lower, and that's also known as 5.40, you cannot close payroll until you've printed your W-2s. We will be having webinars in December related to payroll closing and what's applicable if you're on a legacy payroll versus the difference if you're on the new business framework. So just make sure before you close payroll that you attend one of our webinars in December, and also just make sure that you know exactly what you need to do in your version. Someone from our support team will be more than glad to help you with that. So there's really not a lot of other information to cover. I'm going to, let me make this a little bit smaller in case you want to do a screen capture of this list. Again, it is available in your Sage 100, so you should be able to easily find it, or call Oasis, or someone from our Sage team will be more than glad to provide you with this list. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you realize that you have not closed modules for years, and what do I need to do to get caught up so that I don't lose valuable information? I want to make sure I'm caught up and doing things properly. Please reach out to our support team, and they can be reached at techsupport@oasisky.com, or you can call our main number, which is area code 502-429-6902, extension 227. And we will be glad to get the request set up, and a member of our team will be glad to give you a call, connect to your system, look at each of the modules that you use, look at your setup settings, and make recommendations on what you need to do to make sure that you are staying current. So this really is a fairly short process in presentation on what you need to do related to year end. So just keep in mind, look at each of your modules, look at the setup of each module, look at the setup of each module to see what fiscal year and current period that it thinks you're in. Look at the history, see how long you're keeping history, make sure you're keeping it for an adequate amount of time. Make sure that if you change any of these settings, make sure that you get a good backup. And then at that point, you can start doing period end processing. And every module that has period end processing will have a folder called period end. And you will have your period end processing here. And Sage will also know whether it is a period end closing or it is a year end. So it knows that based on how you have your fiscal year set up, your fiscal year and your periods. So it will know that automatically. When you go into period end processing, it's not going to allow you to do period end processing if you have any data entry in progress. So if you get an error message like this, you're going to have to update all of those transactions first. And let me see if I can find a module that maybe doesn't have something in process. May not be able to find it in my demo data. Okay, so we have this in process. Once you go into this one, I just bypassed it, but I would want to exit out and update everything in sales order. But it tells me that it's going to close period 5 of this fiscal year. And you can't change this. It's going to close the oldest period that's open. And then it's also going to say, do you want to print period end reports? In your modules, let me just show you this real quickly. See where you have period end report selection? On the older versions of Sage, it printed tons of reports, and some of them you may not need. So now you can go in the newer version and do period end report selection, and you can say which reports that you want to print at period end. So if I'm not interested in a sales recap by product line, I can actually remove that report. So I can just keep the reports that I want to print, leave that list, and then when I go in to do period end processing, and again, let me get past that message, then if this box is checked, all of the reports that were in my selection, it's going to print those reports for me prior to doing the period end. And the other good thing that you can keep in mind, you can print hard copies, or through the paperless office feature, you can have those period end reports go directly to a PDF. So you're printing them to a PDF and storing them in paperless, but you do have those. So you can go back and reference them at any time. So again, I'm going to bring up the list one more time if you want to see that. Again, I'm going to provide you with our how to reach tech support if you're unfamiliar with that. And you can email TECHSUPPORT, tech support, at oasisky.com, or you can call our Sage support team at 502-429-6902, extension 227. We ask that you not email or call a consultant direct because they could be on vacation, they could be on site for several days doing an upgrade or an implementation, and they will not be able to respond to you in a timely manner. So by contacting our tech support department direct, we will get a service ticket set up for you, and it will get dispatched to whoever is managing the help desk that particular day. So I would like to thank you for your time, and that concludes our session on the order of closing for Sage 100. Thank you.